Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to Chapter 7 of the book, second edition, Transformative Nursing in the NICU. My name is Mary Coughlin. I'm the president and founder of Caring Essentials Collaborative and the author of this second edition of Transformative Nursing in the NICU, Trauma-Informed Age-Appropriate Care. Where we last left off, I had given you an overview of the healing environment, one of the 5 core measures. And today's core measure that I'm going to talk about is called Compassionate Collaborative Relationships. Now, in the book, actually, the title of the chapter is Compassionate Family Collaborative Care. That was the original core measure label. It was Family Collaborative Care. And I chose that name to really make a distinction between family-centered care and family integrated care was coming out. And again, I was looking for the language that was somehow going to really speak to what it is that we really are trying to create in partnership with families. And although the book came out before I had made this final, this is where we're going to go with this title, I feel compassionate collaborative relationships really touches upon what it is that at least I'm trying to communicate with regard to this particular core measure. I rationalized, or I reasoned that by having a separate core measure looking at family, I felt like we were still creating that silo mentality. We were still separating the family from all of the important clinical stuff that we do, and then we do the family, instead of really integrating the family throughout all of the core measures. And so, that's kind of like where we're at right now with this core measure. But much of the research, much of the groundwork that's presented in this chapter is relevant, regardless of the title of the core measure itself. And so my opening quote for this chapter is from Helen Keller: "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." And I think that just really highlights the opportunities that we have as clinicians to fully partner with parents. What does that mean? It means not in a patriarchal way, not marginalizing the role of the family, but authentically partnering with them, creating these compassionate, collaborative relationships that are, yes, with the families, but also compassionate, collaborative relationships with our colleagues and even the patient, even the baby. And so if you remember from chapter 6, when we talked about the healing environment, each core measure has 3 attributes. And so the attributes associated with this particular core measure of chapter 7 is looking at emotional well-being. It's looking at self-efficacy, and it's looking at communication. Those are the 3 attributes associated with compassionate collaborative relationships. The beginning, the opening content really looks at this concept of compassionate family collaborative care that I really kind of co-opted or adopted from the work of Lown et al. That talks about compassionate relationships and the importance of compassionate care that and collaboration. So to collaborate is to work jointly, to cooperate with and willingly assist a group to achieve together. And so of course that's going to involve the family, right? Of course that's going to involve the infant. Collaboration, however, without compassion produces technically correct results, but misses the mark in meeting the individual's emotional, spiritual, and psychosocial needs. And that was really extracted from the work of Lown et al. Now, Lown et al. Also identified these 5 principles of compassionate collaborative care. And these principles are called out in a box in the chapter, but they talk about patients and family members are involved in health professional education and practice design. So this is really ramping up. This is next generation, hopefully it won't take that long, where we're really, inviting the consumers to help inform the education of healthcare professionals. How are we best going to support the general population? Healthcare professionals share information and strive to facilitate patient and family participation as their comfort allows, the family's comfort and patient's comfort, while honoring the preferences of patient and families who choose not to be involved. So again, it's that whole idea of individualized care. If you remember kind of those tenets of evidence-based practice, one of the core tenets of that is, based on patient values and preferences that has to fit into the decision making. The patriarchal approach, that hierarchical approach to healthcare, it really doesn't serve anyone. And so we really need to embrace this awareness and understanding. Compassion and collaboration involve attributes, values, and skills that can be taught, modeled, learned, and assessed. And so, when we think about our performance in our jobs, performance evaluations, that we need to really look at that skill set, those competencies. How are we really evaluating individuals from a holistic perspective? Certainly skill sets, technical skill sets are one important aspect of being a high quality professional, but it's so much more than that, right? The fourth principle is that the well-being of professional and family caregivers is critical to their ability to function effectively. So again, if you look at the attributes, it's emotional well-being, self-efficacy, and communication. We need to be aware of that. We need to be able to assess, recognize when somebody is not emotionally well, when somebody is lacking the confidence and competence that they need in order to fully embrace the role and the challenges that they are presented with. And then the final principle, leaders of healthcare and educational organizations and systems must create cultures and provide resources that support compassionate, collaborative care. So it's a full, across the board approach to quality care. And, what just popped into my head is the policy statement from the American Academy of Pediatrics that just came out in August of 21 that talks about trauma-informed care across child health services, that we really need. It's not just the frontline folks that we need to, be telling them what to do and that sort of thing. It's across the entire system. We all own a piece of this. We are all responsible for the care that is provided. And so as I go into this, and if you remember how I set out these core measure chapters, I kind of open up with a broad sweep of what this core measure is all about, what these different attributes are all about. I introduced some of the work of Feely and Collins looking at thriving, and I talk about this a lot when I lecture, that quality healthcare, trauma-informed care, it takes survival to that next level, where our focus is obviously to have the patient survive, but to thrive and flourish. And so, I like their work as they kind of identify these components of thriving so that we can really understand what it is to care for a human being. We're all over what it is to take care of a disease. We've got that nailed. But what we need to do now is integrate that knowledge with what are the needs of this whole being, this whole human. Where are they on their developmental trajectory, whether they're an incredibly premature person or a full-term person or a parent, across their developmental continuum. Are they a young parent? Are they a second time or third time or fifth time parent? Where are they? What other things have happened in their life? How is this trauma impacting them? All of those aspects become paramount as we deliver compassionate, collaborative care through the relationships that we cultivate with others. And of course, that begins with ourselves as well. There was a really cool, I just got to see the abstract, and hopefully I'll get the paper, that was talking about perceptions, staff perceptions in the NICU of family-centered care. And while many of the clinicians acknowledged the importance of family-centered care, the majority of them also said that they didn't provide that level of care due to lots of competing priorities and all that kind of stuff. And I understand, we understand that, but we also need to look at this idea of family-centered care as something bigger than just more stuff that I have to do, but it's really a way I show up. It's the way I engage with others. And so the authors kind of made a mention of one of the vehicles to help clinicians understand and embrace and integrate this idea of family-centered care or compassionate collaborative relationships is through reflective practice. It's through examining our own experiences with these situations and then taking that wisdom and insight and then applying it to, the situations that we find ourselves in with, families in crisis and that sort of thing. So, and also in this chapter was an opportunity for me, again, to take us out of that super microscopic view of the work that we do in the NICU and connect it with the larger world. So, I talk about these social determinants of health in building these compassionate collaborative relationships. As challenging as it may appear on first pass, we do need to understand what are the other barriers that these families in crisis are facing. What is their trauma history? What are their resources? Do they experience relational poverty? Are they all on their own? Are they in food deserts? Do they have limited transportation? All of this is going to impact how they engage and support their baby and how they handle the crisis themselves, right? How they cultivate self-efficacy, that I got this feeling. If you're freaking out and you are impoverished and you have no support network and you have no way of getting back and forth to the hospital, you're not feeling like you got this at all. And if you remember, some of the work I talked about earlier, it's our responsibility to take these situations that are in crisis and hold the space and support the family through the crisis. It's not like, well, that really stinks for you. Gee whiz, I hope you figure that out. And we just keep plodding along. No, that, as healers in this larger healthcare situation, we have an opportunity and a responsibility to help these families look at what are the resources, how can we curate them and bring them together into a package, and not through another silo mechanism. That's not my job, I'm the nurse, go talk to the social worker. And then I have no idea what the social worker said to the family, but I know they talk, so hopefully something gets sorted out. Are you kidding me? We need to really have those collective conversations. That's the communication piece of collaborative, compassionate relationships, that we all have skin in the game. We all are responsible for the holistic care of this family in crisis, not just what we deem as our niche, because of our credential or discipline and that sort of thing. We're all responsible. And I summarized this opening section by, suggesting that to ensure parent presence and engagement within the NICU, clinicians must understand and address the economic, social, spiritual, emotional, and environmental barriers faced by families in crisis. The needs of the infant and family extend beyond the baby's bed space. Perinatal and neonatal healthcare professionals are uniquely positioned to identify vulnerable populations and design comprehensive compassion-based strategies to address social determinants of health and the sustainable development goals that have been identified by the United Nations during the NICU stay and beyond. We need to have that full picture. This is an entire family, the beginning of an entire family that we are touching. And so we need to help them overcome these barriers and challenges, ensure that continuity of support and service across the continuum of care, not just on my shift, but in the entire hospital stay. And so then again, I break it down into what does this idea of compassionate collaborative care or relationships mean for the clinician? And I talk about, the self-care challenges of the clinician. I talk about the organizational hierarchies, power differentials, gender issues, reduced levels of nurse autonomy that confound the capacity of healthcare professionals to collaborate authentically and can lead to moral distress and burnout. And we're seeing a lot of this moral distress and burnout as a consequence of COVID, which is literally the straw that broke the camel's back. It was already a broken system, and now it's really imploding. And so we need to learn from this and really recognize how do we pick up the pieces, and what pieces do we pick up to move on? Because we can't build the same thing. If we build the same thing, we're going to get the same outcome. And that's not what is needed. And so we see lots of issues with burnout. Well, what is the root cause of burnout? The root cause of burnout are those actions that are barriers to operationalizing our highest self, right? Being compassionate, being caring, connecting with that person. We think that we have to distance ourselves from the suffering of others, maintain that professional line, because somehow if we don't, we're not professional when we're compassionate and caring. And, I understand what folks are trying to say with that, but if you really think about it, it's those moments when we do connect to that raw edge of humanity, that when we can simply ease the suffering of another person simply by being present, not saying anything, those are the opportunities and the experiences that fill our cup up. There is nothing more we can do in many situations. But that doesn't mean that we all run and hide and we go do the admission over in the other room so we can avoid this awkward, uncomfortable situation. It's when we lean in that we feel replenished, that we know at that heart and soul level that we have given our best, we have given our all to another person. And so, I talk about that and reference some really great information. This is a really cool paper by Singh et al. That talks about barriers and facilitators in the organizational environment to compassion. Challenges to compassion can be personal, relational, systemic. The facilitators can also meet those same themes, go along with those same themes, but there's really a huge and intriguing body of research that is presented here in this chapter to really help us re-examine, why are we having such a crazy time with all of this? Why can't we just figure out how to be compassionate, how to be collaborative consistently and reliably to foster that emotional well-being, self-efficacy, not just with the patients and their families, but with our colleagues as well. And we do that through communication, right? Through our authenticity, through our courage to be there in those difficult situations and maybe not know what to say, but know that something needs to be done. And so I share, some of the challenges, with these paternalistic values and a lack of shared decision-making, and how that can really impede not only quality patient care, but impede that sense of teamwork and collaboration amongst our interdisciplinary colleagues, or teams. And so then there's some evidence-based strategies to support that. There's a really great paper here. It was put out by Interprofessional Education Collaborative 2016, where they actually identify core competencies for interprofessional collaborative practice. And you may be seeing this term more and more often. There was some really early papers out of the, oh, good golly, what is it? The, it's NIH or NLF. I apologize, I can't remember, but it was a brilliant position statement talking about the direction of future education for healthcare professionals as being interprofessional, that we really need to remove the silos and cross-pollinate, with the work that we do. I get to do this a lot with the Trauma-Informed Professional Certificate Program, and it's a multidisciplinary journey of colleagues. And of course, I always have my nurse hat on, and it's really fun to, be respectful of my interdisciplinary colleagues, but to be able to talk from with my nursing hat on and find out, how does this resonate with you as a physician, as an occupational therapist, as a speech language pathologist? And that's how we build the new knowledge that we need, that lifts us up and out of our silos to really serve at that higher level. So I think you'd like this chapter. It's really cool. There's just so much really great stuff out there that talks about what are the things that are really holding us back in making these connections and collaborations. And we talk about biases, personal biases that we may not even be aware of, right? But we have to be curious, and we have to have the courage to face these biases if we're going to transcend and move beyond them. And then I transition into, what does this attribute mean, or this core measure rather, mean for the family? And we really get into the challenges that the family faces. I introduced the work of Krieger. This was a 2020 paper, wicked interesting, that talks about the ecosocial theory of disease distribution. Ecosocial theory. Really, really fascinating. And again, it's that complex messiness of life that contributes to how I show up in this crisis, in my life, to my baby, to you guys as the healthcare team, and vice versa, right? How I show up to the service of these families in crisis. Really understanding that all of these contributing factors, historical generation, biology, ecosystems, power levels, life source, all of this stuff. Otteson et al., this was 2019, put together this really cool graphic that I've included in the chapter here. And the paper is entitled an ethnography of parents' perceptions of patient safety in the NICU. And so again, it's that, looking at the experience through the eyes of others, instead of just my eyes. Well, I know what I'm trying to do here. And if you don't see that, well, you're just crazy. Who does that serve? Nobody, right? It maybe serves me in my delusion, but it doesn't serve anybody else. And so having the courage and the comfort to try and understand, where are you coming from with this? Let's all talk together and sort this out. That's what compassionate collaborative relationships are all about. And that's how we transcend the biases. That's how we transcend the trauma. And that's how we arrive at a higher level of health and well-being for babies, for families, and even for ourselves as we continuously evolve in our journey as healers. Yeah, this is a pretty good chapter, if I do say so myself. There was so many great supports and references. I love the work that Hall et al. Do when they talk about transforming NICU care to provide comprehensive family support. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the paper where talking about neonatal and intensive parenting units. And that's not what I'm referencing here. But again, looking at the environment through a different lens and thinking about how I fit in service to others, in service to the family in crisis. And so Hall lists 10 recommendations, and I've got them here in the chapter. So I think you're going to find a lot of really great information. And then finally, we come down to the baby. What does compassionate collaborative relationships mean for the baby? And I reference a fair bit of work from Welch and her work around the calming cycle and oxytocin, those social relationships. We know that the number one trauma experienced by a newborn is maternal separation, and how that impacts them biologically, psychologically, socially, emotionally. And so that compassionate collaborative relationships is, certainly the gold standard relationship is with the parent, but in the absence of the parental presence, it doesn't mean like, oh, sorry, you're up the creek without a paddle. Your parents aren't here, so there's not going to be any socializing. We step in. We are surrogates for the family when they're not there. And so it becomes incumbent on us to demonstrate those relationships, those connections, those touch encounters that help support the development of that individual. And I don't know that I talk about it in here, but it came to the top of my head, so I'm going to mention it. The frequency in which we use gloves for care practices, during times when we're not coming in contact with blood and body fluids, but people get all crazy and think we need to wear gloves all the time. How does that gloved touch impact that developing human who is looking to feel the warmth, the energy, the love that is conveyed during that tender touch, during that compassionate touch? Yes, there's a lot of procedural touch that we have to expose that baby to, but can we soften that procedural touch? Can we integrate some loving touch around the procedural touch? And hopefully maybe even bring on a second person to support us so that that individual, that baby, can feel seen, can feel cared for, can have all of that physiologic, biologic, and psychological input through their sensory motor experience with us in a way that doesn't derange their development, doesn't add to their toxic stress, but actually mitigates and buffers the toxic stress through our relationships, that compassionate, collaborative relationship. And so I do reference a fair bit of the work, again, from Welch and her group around the family nurture intervention, which is really interesting. Talk about the work of Renee Flacking, where she talks about pathways to emotional closeness in neonatal units. You know, we think that the parents are present, so all is right in the world, and it may be pretty good. You know, physical presence is definitely important, but it doesn't necessarily mean if I'm physically present that I'm also emotionally present. And so, you know, really talking about how do we support that? Again, looking at the attributes of this core measure: emotional well-being, self-efficacy, and communication. We need to have the courage to communicate with the families and make the assessments, not with a here, fill out this form and check off whether or not you're depressed. I'm not saying that that's not important. It is important, but we can actually glean so much more information by having that one-on-one conversation with that individual, really understand where are they coming from? How are they doing in this situation? Now, as I say this, I do recognize that we have so many competing priorities, and it's up to us, and now I'm saying us frontline nurses, to really be able to state, these are the priorities. This is how I can really deliver on the care, the quality of care that this patient and family needs. By making those statements, by joining together, banding together, becoming trauma-informed professionals, creating a milieu that recognizes the importance of relationships, of buffering these traumatic and tragic experiences that the families are having to endure. Because once they're discharged, it's not like it ends, it just continues. It continues across, service lines and across developmental stages. It never ends. The imprint has been made on this individual. So how are we going to buffer that? How are we going to arm the family with the tools they need to build that self-efficacy, that confidence and competence, that I got this feeling. I know where my resources are. I don't have to have all the answers right now, but the team here has really supported me and helped me process the trauma, the emotional challenges, the financial, the social, all that kind of stuff. And now I feel like I've got this. So again, it's that kind of a opportunity for us to really amp up our game in how we engage with families, and that families aren't just this one thing we have to do in the unit. We have to attend to the families, that they're integral, literally, into every aspect of the care that we provide. And so I wrap up the chapter with, I've got some pretty cool resources here, a pretty extensive bibliography, but I also ended up with a cool quote from Maya Angelou. You can't go wrong, right? My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style. Surviving is important. Thriving is elegant. So I hope you enjoy the chapter, and I will be back to share with you the next chapter, chapter 8, where we'll talk about protected sleep. But I want to thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me and learn a little bit more about compassionate collaborative relationships. Please visit our website, caringessentials.net, and I'll have some contact information below where you can reach out to me directly if you have any questions or concerns. So thank you so very much. Take care and care well. Bye.